Okay, hello everyone. Today is Thursday, April the 20th, 420 for anybody who,
Yeah.
all of us in the know. It's 420. Happy Marijuana Day. Yay. Um, so here we are. We're
Okay,
gonna
now I get
we're gonna continue. We're going to continue in our study of, no, we're going to continue in our leisurely stroll with a novel. We do so much heavy metaphysical work, then sometimes it's good just to sit back and relax and have some fantasy. So the book that we're reading today is the Book of Longings. And Reverend Sakina, would you like to take it away?
Sure. Let's just become still for a few moments and exhale all the challenges that we had today and inhale all the blessings that have come our way and that continue to come, whether we are aware of them or not. We give thanks to the source for the inspiration that it gives us. And may we share that inspiration and any questions that might occur during this session. Open our hearts and our minds to this novel and to the insight that the author had in sharing it. We ask that it be so, and so it is.
so it is.
Okay, we're going to begin with chapter 4. My mother's name, Hadar, means splendor, a name she did her best to uphold. She stepped into the room wearing a robe the color of emeralds and her finest carnelian necklace, trailed by Shipra, who was laden with a stack of luxuriant clothes and an array of purses containing jewelry, combs, and eye paint. Balanced on top of her pile was a pair of honey-colored sandals with tiny bells sewn to the straps. Even Shipra, a servant, wore her best coat and a carved bone bracelet. We will leave soon for the market, Mother announced, and you will accompany us. If she hadn't arrived with such a pressing mission, she might have noticed me glancing at the bowl beneath the bed and wondered at the object of my fascination. But her curiosity wasn't aroused, and in my relief, I didn't at first question the irrationality of attending the market in such finery. Shipra removed my robe and replaced it with a white linen tunic, heavily embroidered with silver thread. She wrapped an indigo girdle about my hips, slid the musical sandals onto my feet, and admonished me to stand still as she lightened my brown face with chalk and barley flour. Her breath smelled of lentils and leeks, and when I twisted away, she pinched the lobe of my ear. I stamped my foot, unleashing a gust of bell ringing. Stand still. We can't be late, Mother said, handing Shipra a stick of knoll and watching as she lined my eyes, then rubbed oil into my hands. I could hold my tongue no longer. Must we dress so lavishly to attend the market? The two women exchanged a look. A patch of red bloomed beneath Mother's chin and spread across her neck, as it often did when she was being devious. She ignored me. I told myself there was no reason for unease. Mother's pageants were not uncommon, though they were typically confined to the banquets she orchestrated for Father's patrons in the reception hall. Extravaganzas of roasted lamb, honey figs, olives, hummus, flatbread, wine, glittering oil lamps, musicians, acrobats, a fortune-telling mangus. Her exhibitions never included ostentatious walks to the market. Poor Mother. She seemed always in need of proving something, though I'd never known what precisely until Yalta arrived. During one of our roof talks, my aunt had revealed that my mother's father had made his living as a poor merchant in Jerusalem, selling clothes, and not especially fine ones. Father in Yalta, however, descended from a noble line of Greek speaking Jews in Alexandria, which with ties to the Roman authorities. Naturally, arranging a marriage between two families separated by a chasm like this would have been impossible unless the bride possessed extraordinary beauty or the groom bore some bodily defect. As it was, mother's face was unsurpassed, and the thigh bone of father's left leg was shorter than his right, causing him to limp ever so slightly. Realizing that my mother's display of grandeur were motivated not by conceit alone, but by an attempt to offset her low bearing, had come as a relief. It made me pity her. Shipra pinioned my hair with ribbons and fastened a headband of silver coins across my forehead. She draped me in a stifling woolen cloak dyed scarlet, and not from cheap madder root, but from the rich red of female insects. As a last torment, mother dropped a yoke of lapis beads around my neck. Your father will be pleased, she said. Father? He's coming too? She nodded, pulling a saffron coat about her shoulders and drawing the mantle over her headdress. When has father ever walked to the market? I couldn't comprehend what was happening, only that I seemed to be at the center of it, and it felt ill omened. If Judas were here, he would take my part. He always took my part. He insisted to mother I be exempt from the spindle, loom, and lyre, and left to my studies. He asked my questions of the rabbi when I wasn't allowed to speak at synagogue. I wished for him now with all my heart. What of Judas? I asked. Has he returned? Mother shook her head and looked away from me. He had always been her favorite, the lone herder of her adoration. I wanted to believe it was because he accorded her the status that came from having a son, or because he'd been troubled and broken-hearted as a child and needed the extra portion. And Judas was, after all, handsome and affable, filled with equal measures of principle and kindness, the rarest of combinations, while I was willful, impulsive, composed of strange hopes and selfish rebellion. I must have been very hard for her to love. And Yalta? I asked, desperate for an ally. Yalta? She spit the word. Yalta will remain here. We moved along the main thoroughfare of Sepphoris, like an imperial barge, gliding along the colonnaded street over the gleaming crushed limestone, forcing people aside, father leading the way, then mother, Shipra, and I, flanked by two soldiers who shouted to passerbys to make way. I watched father's stocky frame striding ahead, listing a little side to side. He wore a red coat, as I did, and a matching hat that rose from his head like a loaf of bread. His large ears protruded on either side of the hat like little shells, while underneath his great bald head, which he considered a reproach from God, was hidden from view. Earlier, upon seeing me, he nodded at mother in some tacit way, and studying me further, said, You must and frown so, Anna. Tell me the purpose of our excursion, father, and I'm sure I'll appear more agreeable. He didn't answer, and I asked again. He ignored me, as mother had. It was not unusual for my parents to disregard my queries. It was their daily habit, but their refusal to answer alarmed me. As we paraded along the street, my growing panic sent me wandering in wild and terrified imaginings. It occurred to me the market was inside the same vast Roman basilica that housed the court, as well as the public hall where our synagogue met, and I began to agonize that we weren't going to the market at all, but to a tribunal where Judas would be accursed of entry, and our show of wealth was meant to deter his punishment. That was certainly it, and my fear for my brother was no less than it'd been for myself. Moments later, however, I pictured us at the synagogue, where my parents, weary of my constant pleas to study as boys did, would accuse me of dishonoring them with my ambition and self importance. The rabbi, the supercilious one, would write a curse and force me to swallow an infusion of the ink with which it was written. If I were sinless, the curse would have no effect. And if I were guilty, my hands would waste away, so I would no longer write, and my eyes would grow too dim to read, or perhaps they would fall out of my head altogether. Hadn't a test such as this been given to a woman accused of adultery? Wasn't it said that her thighs wasted and her belly swelled, as warned in the scriptures? Why, I could be handless and blind by this very night. And if the synagogue is not our destination, I told myself, perhaps we would go to the market after all, where I would be bartered to an Arabian prince or a spice dealer who would carry me across the desert on the back of a camel, ridding my parents of me once and for all. I took a breath, then another, calming my spinning, senseless thoughts. Gazing at the sun, I judged it was almost noon, and I imagined Yalta waking to find the house empty with only Lavi left to tell her we'd all trapezed off to the market in our most splendid dress. I willed her to come in search of us. She could scarcely miss us. There was nothing omitted from our possession except cymbals and trumpets. I glanced over my shoulder in hopes of seeing her, picturing how she would appear, winded, clothed in her simple flax tunic, somehow knowing I was in peril. She would fall in step with me, her shoulders drawn back in that proud way she had. She would take my hand, saying, "I'm here. Your aunt is here." The city was clogged with the affluent citizenry of Sepphoris, as well as foreigners from across the empire. I caught snatches of Latin and Phrygian. I think that's how that's pronounced, Phrygian, as well as Aramaic, Hebrew, and Greek. And as usual, there were throngs of day laborers from Nazareth, the stonemasons, carpenters, and quarry workers who made the hour-long walk across the Nahal, Sapori Valley each day to find work in one of Herod Antipas' building projects. They clattered carts through the streets in a din of bellowing donkeys, and shouts, drawing out the jingle of coins on my forehead, the bells on my sandals, the pandemonium in my chest. As we neared the city mint, someone in the crowd shouted, "Behold, Herod Antipas, dogs," in the Aramaic dialect of the Nabateans. And I saw father flinch. When others took up the chant, our guard at the rear trudged into the mob, pounding his shield for effect, which caused the laughter to die. Ashamed of our extravagance and only mildly startled by the hatred for us among the peasants, I lowered my head, not wanting to meet their stares. And it came back to me what I most wished to forget about the day Judas disappeared. On that morning, he had accompanied me to the market where I'd hoped to find some papyri. Typically, it was left to Lavi to be my chaperone, but Judas had offered, and I'd been jubilant. Strolling along the same route we'd traveled now, we'd come upon an overturned barrow, and beside it a laborer whose arm was partially pinned beneath a marble slab. Blood crept from beneath the stone on feathery spider legs. I tried to restrain Judas from rushing to his side. "He's unclean," I cried, grabbing his arm. "Leave him." Judas jerked free and looked at me with disgust. Anna, what do you know of his plight? You, a privileged girl who has never known a hard day of work or a pang of hunger. Are you your father's daughter after all? His words were no less crushing than the slab of stone. I remained immobile and shamed as he lifted it off the man and bound his wound with a strip of cloth torn from his own tunic. Returning to me, he said, give me your bracelet. What? Give me your bracelet. It was a band of pure gold carved with a twisting grapevine. I drew back my arm. He leaned close to my face. This man, he broke off, gesturing at the entire ragged collection of sweat slicked laborers who had stopped to stare. All of these men deserve your mercy. They know nothing but taxes and debt. If they cannot pay, Herod Antipas takes their land, and they have no way to live other than this. If this man cannot work, he will end up a beggar. I slid the band from my wrist and watched as Judas placed it in the injured man's hand. It was later that same night that Judas and father had clashed while Mother, Yalta, and I listened from the balcony above the reception hall, pressed into the shadows. I regret that a follower of Simon ben Joris spit on your father, Judas said, but you cannot condemn him. These men alone fight for the poor and deep and disposed. I do not condemn them, father shouted. I condemn them for their banditry and rabble rousing. As for the poor and disposed, they have reaped what they sowed. His pronouncement on the poor, rendered with such ease, such malice, incensed Judas, who bellowed back, the poor have reaped only the brutality of Antipas. How are they to pay his taxes on top of Rome's tributes and their mandatory tithes to the temple? They are being broken, and you and Antipas are the pistol. For moments there was not a sound. Then father's voice, barely a hiss. Get out. Leave my house. Mother sucked in her breath. And uncaring as father had been to Judas over the years, he'd never gone so far as this. Would Judas have lashed out if I hadn't provoked his disgust earlier that day with my own words of malice? I felt sickened. My brother's footsteps echoed in the flickering light below, then died away. I turned to look at Mother. Her eyes were shining with abhorrence. For as long as I'd had memory, she despised my father. He refused to allow Judas into the narrow precincts of his heart, and Mother's revenge had been I apologize, people. And Mother's revenge had been methodical and spectacular. She pretended to be barren. Meanwhile, she swallowed wormwood, wild rue, even chasteberries, known to be rare and of great price. I'd found the preventives in the herb box Shipra kept hidden in the storeroom below the courtyard. With my own ears, I'd heard the two of them discuss the wool Mother soaked in linseed oil and placed inside herself before father visited her, and of the resins with which she swabbed herself afterward. It was said women were made for two things, beauty and procreation. Having granted father beauty, Mother saw to it he was denied procreation, refusing him children besides me. All these years, and he'd never caught on to her deception. At times it had crossed my thoughts that my mother might not be driven solely by vengeance, but also by her own female peculiarity, not an unbound ambition like mine, but an aversion to children. Perhaps she feared the pain and risk of death that came with birthing them, or she abhorred the way they ravaged a woman's body, or she resented the exhausting efforts required to care for them. Perhaps she simply didn't like them. I couldn't blame her for any of that, but if she feigned an inability to give birth for such reasons, why then did she birth me? Why was I here at all? Had her chasteberries failed to work? The question vexed me until I reached 13 and heard the rabbi speak of a rule that allowed a man to divorce his wife if she had not given birth in 10 years. And it was as if the heavens parted and the reason for my existence toppled from God's throne and landed at my feet. I was my mother's safeguard. I was born to protect her from being cast out. Now mother walked behind my father, holding herself erect, her chin high, looking neither right nor left. In the sunlight, her golden coat seemed lit with 100 flames. The air shone brighter around her than the rest of us, filled with haughtiness and beauty, and the scent of sandalwood. Searching the crowded streets once more for Yalta, then Judas, I began to repeat my secret prayer, moving my lips but making no sound. Lord our God, hear my prayer, the prayer of my heart. Bless the largeness inside me, no matter how I fear it. The words calmed me as the city flowed past, magnificent structures that awed me each time I ventured out. Antipas had filled Sepphoris with imposing public buildings, a royal treasury, frescoed basilicas, a bathhouse, sewers, roofed sidewalks, and paved streets laid out in perfect Roman grids. Large villas like father's were common throughout the city, and Antipas' palace was as rich as any kingly residence. He'd been resurrecting the city or restructuring the city since Rome raised it all those years ago when Judas lost his parents. And what had risen from the ashes was a wealthy metropolis that rivaled any but Jerusalem. Lately, Antipas had begun construction on a Roman amphitheater on the northern slope of the city that would seat 4,000 people. Father himself had come up with the idea as a way for Antipas to impress the emperor Tiberius. Judas said it was just another way to shove Rome down our throats. Father, however, wasn't finished with his scheming. He advised Antipas to mint his own coins, but break from Roman custom by leaving off his image and replacing it with a menorah. The ingenious gesture gave Antipas the appearance of reverencing the same Mosaic law I'd broken earlier that morning. The people called Herod Antipas the fox, but my father was the slyer one. Was I like him, as Judas had implied? As the market came into sight, the crowd thickened. We plowed past clusters of men, members of court, scribes, government officials, and priests. Children hauled sheaves of herbs, barley, and wheat, armloads of onions, doves in stick cages. Women bore wares on their heads with bewildering steadiness, jars of oil, baskets of late harvest olives, bowls of cloth, stone pitchers, even three-legged tables, whatever they could sell, all the while greeting one another. Shalama, shalama. I never saw these women without envy for how they came and went freely without the bondage of a chaperone. Surely peasantry was not all that bad. Inside the basilica, the commotion intensified along with the airless heat. I began to sweat inside my elaborate coat. I swept my eyes over the carnivorous room, over rows after row of stalls and market carts. There was an odor of sweat, charcoal, skewered meat, and the putrid salted fish from Magdala. I pushed the back of my hand to my nostrils to lessen the stench and felt the soldier who tromped behind us nudge me forward. Up ahead, my mother stopped midway along a row of stalls that sold goods from the silk route, Chinese paper, silks, and spices. She idly inspected an azure cloth while my father continued on to the row's end where he lingered, his eyes roaming the multitudes. From the moment we'd set out, I'd feared we were walking towards something calamitous, sensing it not only in the oddness of our expedition, but in the minute movements of my parents' faces. And yet here was my mother, serenely shopping for silk, and my father patiently watching the crowd. Had she come to trade after all? My breath left me in a rush of relief. I didn't notice the small man who approached my father, not until the crowd parted a bit and I saw him stride forward and greet father with a bow. He was clothed in an expensive coat of deep purple and a towering cone-shaped hat, perhaps the tallest hat my eyes had ever beheld, which drew attention to his exceptionally short stature. My mother laid down the sheath of azure. Looking back, she waved me forward. Who is father's companion? I asked, reaching her side. He is Nathaniel ben Hania, your father's acquaintance. He could have been a boy of 12, except for the voluptuous beard that plunged to his chest like twisted hanks of flax fiber. He plucked at it, his spirit eyes darting toward me, then away. He owns not one, but two estates, she informed me. One grows dates, the other olives. Then one of those small, nameless moments occurred that would loom large only later. A sweep of color at the edge of my eye. Turning toward it, I spotted a young man, a peasant, with uplifted hands and long strands of spun thread looped about his outspread fingers. Red, green, lilac, yellow, blue. The threads seemed streamed to his knees like bright falls of water. In time, they would remind me of rainbows, and I would wonder if God had sent them as a sign of hope, as he'd done for Noah, something for me to cling to amid the drowned ruins that awaited. But right then, the sight was nothing more than a lovely distraction. A girl, not much older than I, was attempting to coil the lengths of thread into neat whorls in order to sell them. I could tell they were tinted with cheap vegetable dyes. The young man laughed, a deep, booming laugh, and I noticed he was wiggling his fingers, making the threads flutter, rendering them impossible to capture. The girl laughed too, though she was trying very hard not to. There was so much unexpectedness in the scene, so much gladness, that I fixed on it. I'd seen women offering their fingers as sorting pegs, never men. What manner of man assists a woman with the balling of her yarn? He appeared older than I by several years, as old as 20. He had a short, dark beard and thick hair that fell to his chin, as was the custom. I watched him push a lock behind one ear, where it refused to stay, tumbling back into his face. His nose was long, his cheekbones broad, and his skin the color of almonds. He wore a coarse, rough weave tunic and an outer garment sewn with tisdas, the blue tassels marking him as a follower of God's laws. I wondered if he could be a Pharisee of the fanical sort, one of those unyielding followers of Shammai, who were known to travel 10 fathoms out of the way to avoid encountering one unrighteous soul. I glanced back at mother, worried she would observe me staring, but she was absorbed in her own enthrallment with father's acquaintance. The haggling in the market faded, and I heard father's raised voice cut through the commotion. 1,000 denarii and a portion of your date groves. Their meeting, it seemed, had progressed to an impassioned exchange of business. The girl in the yarn stall finished winding her threads and placed the last orb on a wooden plank that served as a shelf. I thought at first she was the young man's wife, but seeing now how closely she resembled him, I decided they must be siblings. As if feeling the intensity of my stare, the man suddenly looked around, his gaze falling on me like a veil. I could almost feel the heat of it touching my shoulders, my neck, my cheeks. I should have looked away, but I could not. His eyes were the most remarkable thing about him, not for their beauty, though they were beautiful in their way, widely spaced and black as my blackest ink. But it wasn't that. There was a tiny fire in them, an expressiveness I could see even from where I stood. It was as if his thoughts floated in the wet, dark light of them, wanting to be read. I perceived amusement in them, curiosity, an unguarded interest. There was no trace of disdain for my wealth, no judgment, no pious smugness. I saw generosity and kindness, and something else less accessible, a hurt of some kind. While it's true, I thought myself skilled at reading the language of the face, I didn't know whether I really saw all these things or I wanted to see them. The moment stretched beyond propriety. He smiled slightly, a faint lifting of his lips, then turned back to the woman I thought to be his sister. Anna, I heard mother say, her eyes trailing from me to the peasants, your father has summoned you. What does he want of me? I asked, but already it was breaking over me, the truth of why we were here. The diminutive man in purple, the business matter. Your father wishes to present you to Nathaniel Ben Hananiah, mother was saying, who wishes to see you more closely. I looked at the man and felt something tear beneath the flat bone in my chest. That they mean to betroth me. Panic started again, this time like a wave in my belly. My hands began to tremble, then my jaw. I whirled toward her. You cannot betroth me, I cried. I haven't yet come of age. She took my arm and whisked me further away so Nathaniel Ben Hananiah could not hear my objections to see the horror on my face. You can stop perpetuating your lie. Shipra found your bleeding rags. Did you think you could keep it from me? I am not witless. I am only angered that you've carried out such a contemptible deceit. I wanted to scream at her, to hurl words like stones. Where do you think I learned such deceit? From you, mother, who hides chasteberries and wild rue in the storage room. I scrutinized the man they'd chosen for me, his beard more gray than black, curved ruts beneath his eyes, a weariness about his countenance, a kind of bitterness. They meant to give me to him? God slay me. I would be expected to obey his entreaties, oversee his household, suffer his stubby body upon mine, and bear his children, all the while stripped of my pens and scrolls. The thought sent a spasm of rage through me, so fierce I clutched my waist to keep from clawing at her. He is old, I finally managed to say, offering the most feeble recrimination of all. He's a widower, yes, with two daughters. He wants a son, I said, finishing her sentence. Standing in the middle of the market, I paid no heed to the people who stepped around us, to father's soldier waving them along, to the utter spectacle we were. You could have told me what awaited me here, I cried. And did you not betray me? An eye for an eye? That would be reason enough to have kept this meeting from you. She smoothed the front of her coat and glanced nervously toward father. We didn't tell you because we had no wish to endure your fit of protest. It's bad enough that you raise a dispute now in public. She sweetened her tongue, eager to bring an end to my revolt. Gather yourself. Nathaniel is waiting. Do your duty. Much is at stake. I glimpsed the sour-looking little man observing us from a distance and jutted out my chin in the defiant way I'd seen Yalta do when father forbade her some small freedom. I will not be inspected for blemishes like a Passover lamb. Mother sighed. One cannot expect a man to enter something as binding as a betrothal without judging his bride worthy. This is how it's done. And what about me? Shouldn't I be allowed to judge him worthy? Oh, Anna, she said. She gazed at me with the tired old sorrow she felt from enduring such a factitious child. Few girls find happiness in the beginning, but this is a marriage of honor. You will want for nothing. I will want for everything. She gestured for Shipra, who appeared beside us as if she might be called upon to drag me to my fate. The market closed in around me, the feeling of having nowhere to go, no escape. I was not like Judas, who could just leave. I was Anna. The entire world was a cage. I squeezed my eyes shut. Please, I said, do not ask this of me. She nudged me forward. The howling in my head returned, but softer, like someone moaning. I walked toward my father, my feet the carapace of two turtles, my sandals trolling. I was a head taller than Nathaniel Ben Hananiah, and I could see he was repulsed by the need to look up at me. I rose on my toes even higher. Ask her to speak her name so I may hear her voice, he said to father, not addressing me. I did not wait for father. Anna, daughter of Matthias, I half shouted, it as if he were old and deaf. Father would be livid, but I would give the man no cause to think me modest or easy to tame. He glowered at me, and I felt a smidgen of hope that he would find a reason to reject me. I thought of the prayer inside my bowl, of the girl beneath the cloud, Yalta's words, take care what you ask, for you shall surely receive it. God, please do not desert me. The moments sagged beneath a thick, impeccable silence. Finally, Nathaniel Ben Hananiah looked at my father and nodded his consent. I stared into the dim, hazed light of the market, seeing nothing, feeling nothing, listening to them speak of the betrothal contract. They debated the months until the marriage ceremony, my father arguing for 6, Nathaniel for 3. Not until I turned away did grief close over me, a dark forsakenness. My mother, her triumph secured, turned her attention back to the cloth in the silk stall. I walked toward her, fighting to hold myself erect. But midway there the floor tilted and the world slid sideways. Dizzied, I slowed, my red cloak cascading around me, the hem snatching at the bells on my sandals, my foot twerking. I fell onto my knees. I tried to stand, but slumped back, surprised by a sharp pain in my ankle. She has taken ill, someone shouted, and people scattered as if to flee a leper. I remember their shoes like hooves, the little dust storm on the floor. I was the daughter of Matthias, head scribe to Herod Antipas. No one would dare touch me. When I looked up, I saw a young man from the yarn stall coming toward me. A tuft of red thread dangled from the sleeve of his robe. It drifted to the floor as he bent in front of me. It occurred to me he'd witnessed everything that had transpired, the argument with my mother, the transaction for my betrothal, my suffering and humiliation. He had seen. He reached out his hand, a laborer's hand, thick knuckles, calluses, his palm a terrain of hardships. I paused before taking it, not from aversion, but fascination that he'd offered it. I leaned against him, the slightest bit, testing the weight on my foot. When I turned my face to his, I found my eyes almost level with his own. His beard was so close I could, if I were bolder, nod my head and feel it graze my skin. And it surprised me that I wanted to. My heart bounded up, along with an odd smelting in my thighs, as if my legs might give way once again. He parted his lips as if to speak. I remember the eagerness I felt for his voice, for what he would say to me. What happened next would plague me through the strange months to come, raining down at odd moments and sometimes waking me in the night. And I would lie there and wonder how it might have been different. He might have led me to the yarn stall where I could sit on the wood plank among the balls of thread, waiting for the throb in my ankle to subside. My parents would find me there. They would thank the kind man, give him a coin, buy all the yarn the girl had so carefully sorted and wound. My father would say to him, "For your kindness, you must dine with us." Those things did not happen. Instead, before my rescuer could utter the words on his lips, the soldier who trapezed behind us through the streets rushed at us, showing the man violently from behind and shoving the man violently from behind and catching my fall as I lost my balance. I watched him go down, unable to look away as his forehead struck the hard tile. I heard the girl call out his name, "Jesus," as she ran to him, and I must have tried to go to him too, for I felt the soldier restraining me. The man got to his feet, the girl pulling his arm. She seemed terrified, frantic for them to escape before the soldier assailed him further, before the crowd was riled against them. But he took his time, and I remember thinking what dignity he had, what calm. He lifted his fingers to a vicious red welt above his right brow, then straightened his cloak and walked away as prudence dictated, but not without looking back at me, a kind, burning look. My whole being ached to call out to him, to ensure he was not severely harmed, tell him I was sorry, offer him the bracelet for my arm, offer him all the bracelets in my jewel box. But I said nothing, and he and the girl disappeared behind the wall of spectators, leaving their humble lumps of yarn behind. My father and Nathaniel ben Hananiah arrived shouting their insane question. Not, "Are you well?" but, "Did the peasant assault you?" The soldier hurried to justify his actions. "The man rushed at your daughter. I acted to defend her." "No," I exclaimed. "The man came to my aid, my ankle." "Find him," my father shouted, and immediately the brute of a soldier dashed off in the direction the man called Jesus had disappeared. "No," I cried, breaking into a frenzied explanation, but father did not listen or hear. "Quiet," he said, slashing his hand through the air. The pleasure Nathaniel took in witnessing me silenced was not lost on me. His smile was no smile, it was the wriggle of a viper. I squeezed my eyes shut, hoping God was still able to see me, tiny, shrinking son that I was. And I prayed he would let Jesus find his way to safety. When I opened my eyes, I looked at the tile where he had fallen. A slender red thread was curled there. I bent and picked it up. Okay, we're going to stop there for a minute. Any questions? Any comments?
I I in reading that, it just serves to me as a reminder of how women over the years have been sought as nothing more than servants or slaves of the powerful men um, that are in charge of our society. And it just annoyed me, you know. But she seems like a feisty one.
Oh, yeah.
Somebody, somebody that's not going to take it sitting down, and that's what I like about her. Anna,
Yeah.
that is.
Yeah. Yeah, women in the early times, and even to the extent nowadays, in some cases, in some places,
Yeah.
are considered a commodity. Buy and sell. We're just merchandise. And we don't, mean much. And especially back then, women were thought of nothing more than cattle or sheep or something to be bought and sold, whether we liked it or, liked it or not.
And I
But
think,
now,
I think that was more in the elite class as opposed to the middle or working class people, because his Jesus' sister is mentioned. She's there in the marketplace selling, earning money. I don't know whether it was to feed her or help to contribute to the family coffers, so that all of the family would be able to eat. But and
yeah,
as a historian, um, this was true even into the later years, because um, having studied, especially the colonial period of this country, um, you get the impression from some of the things that you read that women, just like Anna, was nothing more than a commodity, something to be bargained with and for, or rather something to be bargained for. Uh, Forget I said with. But
but
on the other hand, there were women who ran businesses in the colonial period, and they were looked up to and they were respected. Um, this hasn't been brought out so far in this book, but when I look back at that, the 1700s, those women were, they owned businesses which they inherited from their husbands. And I don't know if any of you have been to, oh my gosh, it's one of the estates up in Northern Virginia, up in just outside of Washington. But the Lees estate, the Lees that lived up in that area, one of the sisters was married, and when her husband died, she inherited all that he had owned. And she she decided, I'm not getting married, but she wanted the benefits of the marriage bed. So she took in a lover and he lived there with her. And she said, no, I'm not marrying him, and let him take what wealth I have, because as soon as a woman married, whatever she owned it became the property of the man. She had no rights.
yeah. Well, there's one line here where you kind of get the feeling that, Anna would have liked to have been a peasant, because, and I can't find it here, but she says, is it so bad to be a peasant?
Exactly.
You
And
know,
she saw it.
and that's one of the things I liked in this book. It does show a great deal, I felt, of how women were treated, and how even today in some cultures, women are not treated as if they have a mind to think. It's like, you know in that one section, that women only had two reasons for being. One was beauty, and the other one was for procreation. And there are some cultures that's still the way it is. And fortunately, we do have women, and I think those of us here within our haven, we have the courage to stand up and say, hey, wait, I'm more than that. I have a mind. I have abilities. I'm courageous enough to stand forth and be true to who I truly am. I wasn't created for that. Yes, I'm capable of being beautiful. I'm capable of bearing children. I'm capable, though, too, of running a business. I'm capable of doing anything that a man can do if I choose. But the important thing is to be able to choose. So, and that's one of the things I think is brought out in this book. Do we want to go on? Penelope, did you have anything? I guess not. Okay,
You're
let's
on, you're
my
on,
Oh.
mute-
you're,
go on.
yeah, my mute button. I couldn't get it off. You know, y'all know my computer is running slow. One of the things that I thought that was kind of interesting, just from the mom when the way that she used her contraceptives. I thought that yeah, I thought that that's something that you don't really hear much, about in books. Although we do know that there were many women who and still, like in today's society, as much as people are trying to stop people from having abortions, we know that rich women are going to have abortions all the time as much as they want. They're going to use contraception, they're going to do all of those things because they like to keep secrets.
Mhm.
And that's what I see that her mom was doing. She was just keeping a secret. She didn't love that man. She didn't even like him, but she liked the lifestyle.
Yes.
And because she knew the law, so obviously she did some studying. she could read. So and a lot of times, I don't have the book yet, and we're still in the beginning of it, but women have always been in command. They always say, the power behind the throne is supposed to be a woman. That's because we have always shared. We have always shared our knowledge. We have always shared our resources. The first, Queen Catherine of Aragon went into battle pregnant. So we have always, and just thinking about the Bible, the whole the last paragraph. I mean, the last parable. Yeah, there's the Psalms and the parables. That's all about the good wife and how much money she has, and how and what she considers a field and buys it. So we have so much strength and power within us, and I think that that's the side that, what's her name, Anna is the protagonist. Okay.
Yeah.
And I think that that's what we're going to see from Anna, who understood how to live in and use the power that's available. That's what I'm getting so far. Because she's still a kid, right? She's like 14 or something.
Yeah.
Right? She's a kid,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Which is a grown, which was an adult back then. So.
And she's in a way, the author has brought out what young girls went through at that time. At the age of 13, 14, being betrothed to somebody and to marry, and being told, well, you may not like it right now, but in time you'll be taken care of and you don't have to worry. And whether you like it or not, this is your lot in life. This is how it's going to be, where peasant women at that time, young girls, many times the families had, a lot of children. And, it helped if the girl married somebody that would get her out of the parents' house and they wouldn't have to feed her anymore. It was then up to the husband to take care of her. They didn't maybe go through the same type of marriage contracts, because of, depend on the amount of wealth they had. But somebody who was, let's say, very, very poor, and a young man wanted to marry the daughter, the father saw it as, okay, this is one less mouth I have to feed, type of thing. So anyway, in here, this is many of the things that I found, and as we read, she brings up the case of the women back then and how they were treated and what they had to go through, as
Well,
well
Mhm.
as the story. Go on.
no, I was gonna say, even look at her mother. It was explained, her mother was very beautiful.
Mhm.
She didn't like the man that she was married to, or Anna's father, but because she was beautiful, she was able to marry up.
Yes.
And he, because of his default, because he had a defect, he the fact that he did marry down was not frowned upon as it would have been if he had been a soldier type, you know, or a warrior type
Yeah.
of person. So you have the what's the word I want to use? The defective lamb and the beautiful shepherdess.
Yeah. And like I say, she was able to marry up, and it didn't change his status.
Exactly.
Even though he was marrying beneath him, it wasn't going to change his status. He would still be considered wealthy in that. But he was marrying a showpiece.
Mhm.
He was marrying an
Exactly.
ugly woman. Are we
Mhm.
ready to go on?
Sure.
Okay. Yalta was waiting outside the main door of our house. She reminded me of a gray mouse, alert, sniffing the air, her hands fussing beneath her chin. I hobbled toward her, my lashes dripping, Knoll paint that splattered on my red coat. She opened her arms so I could step inside their little circle. My child, you're injured. Bending, I lowered my head into the small ledge of her shoulder and stood there, a broken stalk, wishing to tell her of the tragedy that had befallen my betrothal, the young man wrongly pursued because of me. The words rose in me like a yeasted awfulness, then fell away. I doubted she could fix any of it. Where was dear Judas? I had not spoken a word since the market. Before leaving, Mother had poked her finger into the soft, swollen skin around my ankle. Are you able to walk? She asked. It had been the first recognition of my injury. I nodded, but the trip home soon became torturous. A stab of pain with each step. I had no choice but to use the remaining soldier's thick, bushy arm as a crutch. The red thread I scooped from the market floor was tied securely around my wrist, concealed beneath my sleeve. As I clung to Yalta, I glimpsed a wisp of it peeking out and knew I kept it to remind me of the few vivid moments I'd leaned my body against the man with expressive eyes. This is not a day for sorrow and consolation, Father said. Anna is betrothed, Mother announced with forced cheer, as if to offset my display of bereavement. It is an honorable match, and we give thanks to the Lord for he is good. Yalta's hand stiffened at my back, and I thought now of a great bird lifting me with its claws, carrying me over the rooftops of Zephyrus, out to the nest of hills with their cave mouths. Shipra opened the heavy pine wood door into the vestibule, and there was Lavi, poised inside with a bowl of water and towels for cleansing our hands. Mother pried me from my aunt and thrust me inside. The reception hall floated in afternoon shadows. Steadying myself on one foot, I waited for the day blindness to leave before finally dragging my voice from its hovel. I refused the betrothal, I said, barely above a whisper. I hadn't known I would say this. It shocked me, in fact, but I drew a breath and repeated it more forcefully. I refused the betrothal. Father's hands, wet and dripping, went still over the ewer. Truly, Anna, Mother said, will you now flaunt your disobedience in front of your father, too? You have no choice in this matter. Yalta planted herself before my father. Matthias, you know, as I do, that a daughter must give consent. You have no say in the matter either, Mother said, speaking to Yalta's back. Both father and Yalta ignored her. If it were left up to Anna, he said, she would never consent to a marriage with anyone. He's a widower. He has children already, I said. He's repulsive to me. I would rather be a servant in his house than his wife. Please, father, I beg you. Lavi, who'd been staring grimly into the basin of water, lifted his gaze, and I saw that his eyes swam with sorrow. Mother had an ally in Shipra, scheming Shipra, but I had Lavi. Father had bought him a year ago from a Roman legate who was glad to rid himself of a North African boy better suited to housework than military life. Lavi's name meant lion, but I'd never heard the faintest roar in him, only a gentle need to please me. If I left to marry, he would lose his only friend. Father assumed the air of a sovereign issuing a decree. It is my duty to see that you marry well, Anna, and I will perform that duty with your consent or without it. It makes no difference. I would like your consent. Things would go much smoother that way. But if you do not give it, it will not be difficult to convince a rabbi to proceed over the betrothal contract without it. The finality in his tone and the hard set of his face abolished my last hope. I'd not known father to be this cruel in the face of my pleas. He strode towards the study where he conducted business, pausing to look back at mother. Had you performed your duty better, she would be more compliant. I expected her to lash back, to remind him that he was the one who'd given in to my pleas for a tutor, who'd allowed me to make inks and purchase papyrus, who led me astray, and any other time she would have. But she restrained herself. Instead, she turned her wrath on me. Wrenching me by the arm, she summoned Shipra to grasp my other one, and together they dragged me up the stairs. Yalta trailed us. Hadar, release her! A demand that did nothing but stir a mighty wind at mother's back. I do not think my feet touched the floor as they whisked me along the balcony past the array of doors that opened to our various quarters. My parents', then Judith's, and finally my own. I was pushed inside. Mother followed, instructing Shipra to remain outside and prevent Yalta from entering. As the door banged shut, I heard my aunt shout a curse at Shipra in Greek, a beautiful one having to do with donkey dung. I rarely seen mothers so lit with fury. She stomped about as she castigated me, flame-cheeked, puffing clouds from her nostrils. You've disgraced me before your father, your aunt, and the servants. Your shame falls on me. You will remain confined here until you offer your consent to the betrothal. Beyond the door, Yalta was now hurling slurs in Aramaic. Bloated swine, putrid goat flesh, daughter of a jackal. You shall never have my consent. I spewed the words at mother. Her teeth sharpened in her mouth. Do not mistake my meaning. As your father explained, he will make sure the contract is sanctioned by a rabbi without your permission. Your wishes are irrelevant. But for my sake, you will at least appear to be a compliant daughter, whether you are or not. As she started for the door, I felt the weight of her callousness, of being locked away in a future I didn't know how to bear, and I struck out at her without thinking. And what would father say if he knew the lie you've been perpetuating all these years? She halted. What lie? But she knew what I referred to. I know you take herbs to keep you from becoming with child. I know about the linseed and resins. Mother said, I see. And I suppose if I were to convince your father to abandon the betrothal, You would make sure this news did not reach his ears. Is that it? In all truth, such an ingenious thing had not occurred to me. I'd meant only to wound her as she wounded me. She'd come up with the threat herself and offered it to me as if on a platter, and I seized on it. I was 14, desperate. A betrothal to Nathaniel ben Hananiah was a fool in death. It was life in a sepulchre. I would have done anything to be delivered. Yes, I said, stunned by my fortune. If you convince him, I'll say nothing. She laughed. Tell your father what you wish. It's of no concern to me. How can you say that? Why should I care if you tell him what he already guesses? When Mother's footsteps faded, I cracked the door to find her minion posted at the threshold, hunched on a low stool. There was no sign of Yalta. Will you sleep here too? I asked Shipra, not disguising my anger. She slammed the door shut. Inside my room, the silence became a searing aloneness. With a glance back at the door, I pulled my incantation bowl from beneath the bed and removed the cloth to expose the words of my prayer. I heard wind scratching the sky, and the room dimmed as the clouds scattered. Sitting on the floor mat, I cradled the bowl against my belly for several moments, then turned it slowly, like searing silk, and canted my prayer into the drab light. I sang it over and over until I was weary of begging God to return to me. The largeness in me, what a cruel jest that was, would find no blessing, nor would my reed pens and inks. The words I wrote would not be read by unborn eyes. I would become the forgotten wife of a horrid little man lusting for a son. I cursed the world God had created. Could he not have thought up anything better than this? I cursed my parents for bartering me off without a care for my feelings, and Nathaniel ben Hananiah for his dismissiveness, his sneer, his silly purple hat. What was he trying to offset by wearing that towering protuberance? I cursed the Rabbi Ben Sira, whose words flapped through the synagogues of Galilee as if borne by angels. The birth of a daughter is a loss. Better is the wickedness of a man than a woman who does good. Offspring of serpents, bags of rotten foreskin, decayed pig flesh. I leaped to my feet and kicked the damnable incantation bowl and its empty words, wincing at the pain that jarred through my injured ankle. Dropping back on the bed, I rolled side to side, my body possessed by a soundless keening. I lay there until my rage and grief subsided. I caressed the red thread tied on my wrist, rubbing it between my thumb and forefinger, and his face flared in my mind, this deep, clear sense of him. We hadn't exchanged a word, Jesus and I, but I felt the ripple of intimacy when his hand had clasped mine. It caused a voracious pining at the center of me. Not for him, I didn't think, for myself. Yet a thought pushed into my mind, a sense that he was as wondrous as inks and papyrus, that he was as vast as words, that he could set me free. Dusk came, then nightfall. I did not light the lamps. Okay, I'm going to any questions there or not? If not, I'll continue on.
Yeah, you can keep on going.
Okay, I dreamed, not a dream exactly, but a memory echoing in the coils of my sleep. And this is what it is. I am 12, studying with Titus, a Greek tutor my father had fired after giving in to my inconsolable begging. Mother has assured me I would have a tutor over her dead and buried body, and yet she did not succumb. She lived to rail at me, at father, and at the tutor, who was no more than 19 and terrified of her. On this day, Titus hands me a true wonder, not a scroll, but a stack of dried palm leaves, evenly bound with a leather cord. On them are Hebrew words in black ink and embellishments along the margins in a lustrous golden color I could never have imagined. An ink prepared, he says, from yellow arsenic. I bend close and sniff it. It smells strange, like old coins. I rub my finger across the color and touch the residue to my lips, unleashing a tiny eruption on my tongue. He compels me to read the words aloud, not in Hebrew, but in Greek. Such a thing is beyond me, I tell him. I doubt that's so. Now begin. The exercise maddens me. The exercise maddens me with the need to stop and dissect entire sentences, then piece them back together in a different tongue. But all I really want is to tear through the story on the palm leaves, which is as great a wonder as the golden ink. It's the tale of Asenath, an arrogant Egyptian girl forced to marry our patriarch Joseph, and the ferocious tantrum she throws as a result. I fight through the tortures of translation in order to discover her fate, which must have been the strategy all along. After Titus departs, I lift my copper mirror and gaze at my face as if to assure myself it was really I who accomplished that impossible feat. And as I do, a tiny pain pricks my right temple. I think it's nothing more than the strain of thinking so hard. But then I am engulfed by a curdling in my stomach and a searing headache, which is followed by a flash of light behind my eyes, a ferocious brightness that flares out and swallows the room. I stare, mesmerized, as it contracts into a red disk that hovers before my eyes. Inside it floats the image of my face, a precise reflection of what I've just seen in the mirror. It startles me with a blinding sense of my own existence. Anna who shines. Gradually, it crumbles, becoming ash in the wind. My eyes shot open. The darkness in the room was suffocating, like being inside a ripe black olive. Shipra snores thudded against the door. I got up and lit a single clay lamp and quenched my thirst from the stone pitcher. It was said that if one slept with an amethyst, it would cause a momentous dream. I had no such stone on my bed, yet what had unfolded in my sleep felt auspicious and God sent. I dreamed the incident exactly as it happened 2 years ago. It had been the most peculiar event of my childhood, yet I'd told no one. How could they understand? I myself couldn't fathom what had happened, only that God had tried to tell me something. For weeks afterwards, I scavenged the scriptures, discovering the strange tales of Elijah, Daniel, Elisha, and Moses, and their visions of fire, beasts, and chariot thrones. Was it hubris to think God had sent me an apparition too? At the time, I couldn't decide if the vision was a blessing or a curse. I wanted to believe it was a promise that the light in me would shine forth one day, that I would be seen in this world, I would be heard. Yet I feared it was a warning that such desires would come to nothing. It was entirely possible the vision meant little more than that I was possessed of some demonic illness. With time, I thought of the episode less and less, and finally, not at all. Now, here it was once more. Across the room, my incantation bowl lay on its side, a small, abused creature. I went over and righted it, muttering my sorrow, holding the bowl in my lap. I loosened the red thread from my wrist and laid it inside the bowl, circling it about the figure of the girl. I breathed out, and the sound swept over the room, and then the door creaked open and closed. My child, Yalta whispered. I ran to her, oblivious of my sore ankle. How did you get past? Where's Shipra? She pressed a finger to her lips and cracked open the door to reveal my mother's servant slumped on her stool. Her head drooped to her chest, and a web of spittle woven to the corner of her mouth. I brewed a cup of hot wine steeped with myrrh and passion flower, which Lavi was happy to serve her, Yalta said, closing the door and beaming a little. I would have come sooner, but it took longer than I thought for the drink to overtake the old camel. We sat on the edge of the bed and gripped each other's hands. Her bones were sycamore twigs. They cannot betroth me to him, I said. You cannot let them. She reached for the lamp and held it between us. Anna, look at me. I would do anything for you, but I cannot stop them. When I closed my eyes, there were blurs of light like stars falling. It couldn't be happenstance that the memory had resurfaced in my sleep the same night I was locked in my room, doomed to marriage. Surely the story I had translated of the Egyptian girl forced into an abhorrent marriage was a message urging me to be resolute. Asenath had been merciless in her resistance. I, too, would be merciless. In my face inside that tiny sun, even if my parents married me to the repugnant Nathaniel Ben Hania, I would not be his. I would still be Anna. The vision was a promise, was it not? That the light in me would not be extinguished. The largeness in me would not shrink away. I would yet become visible in this world. My heart trembled a little at the revelation. I think, though, I could persuade your parents of one thing, Yalta was saying. It would not be a remedy, but it would be a consolation. When you marry, I will go with you to your husband's house. Do you think Nathaniel Ben Hania would permit it? He won't like having a widow to feed and clothe and take up space, but I will convince my brother to write the arrangement into your betrothal contract. It won't be difficult. He and Hadar will dance on the roof at the mention of being rid of me. In my 14 years, I'd never had a true and constant friend, only Judas, and I felt a momentary elation. Oh, Aunt, we will be like Naomi and Ruth in the scriptures. Where I go, you will go. Yalta had kept her pledge, not to speak of her past, but now that she'd bound herself to me, I wondered if she might reveal her secret. I know Father has sworn you to silence, I said, but we are joined now. Don't withhold yourself from me. Tell me why you came here to support. The bone kindling inside her hand grew hot. All right, Anna, I will tell you the story, and your parents will not hear of it. Never, I said. I was married to a man named Rubel. He was a soldier in the Jewish militia, charged with protecting Roman rule in Alexandria. I bore him 2 sons, both of whom died before a year of age. It embittered him. Since he could not punish God with his fists, he punished me. I spent my days bruised, swollen, and in dread. On the Sabbath, he rested from his cruelties and thought himself virtuous. I hadn't expected this. It rent something in me. I wanted to ask if Rubel had been responsible for the drooping of her eye, but remained quiet. She said, he fell ill one day and died. It was so abrupt and vile a death, it set loose the tongues of Alexandria. His friends claimed I poisoned him in revenge for his beatings. Did you? I blurted. I wouldn't blame you. She took my chin in her hand. Remember when I told you that in your heart there is a holy of holies, and in this room dwells your secret longing? Well, my longing was to be free of him, I beg God to grant me this, to take Rupal's life, if he must, as the just price for his transgressions. I inscribed the prayer on my incantation bowl and sang it every day. If God were a wife, she would have acted sooner. It took a year for him to take mercy on me. You didn't kill your husband, God did, I said, relieved, but vaguely disappointed too. Yes, but his death was brought about by my prayer. It's why I cautioned you to take care what you wrote in your bowl. When the longing of one's heart is inked into words and offered as a prayer, that's when it springs to life in God's mind. Does it? Earlier tonight, I sent my bowl across the room with my foot, I said. She smiled. Her face looked ancient and somehow beautiful. Anna, your betrothal has stolen your hope. Return to your longing. It will teach you everything. Her words seemed to release a raw power in the air around us. Be patient, child, she continued. Your moment will come, and when it does, you must seize it with all the bravery you can find. She went on describing the rumors that had circulated about her in Alexandria, stories that grew so dire she was arrested by the Romans, whose punishments were well known for their brutality. Our oldest brother, Haran, is on the Jewish council in Alexandria, and he struck a deal with the Romans to allow the council to determine my fate. They sent me away to the Therapeutae. Therapeutae, I repeated, feeling how thick the word was on my tongue. What is it? It's a community of Jews, philosophers mostly, like me, like you. They come from educated and affluent families with servants to chew their food and haul their dung. Yet they gave up their comforts to live in little stone houses on an isolated hillside near Alexandria. But why? What do? They contemplate God with a fervor you can scarcely imagine. They pray and fast and sing and dance. I found it to be too much fervor for me. They do practical work too, like growing food, hauling water, sewing garments, and such. But their real work is to study and write. Study and write. The thought filled me with wonder and stirring. How could there be such a place? And are there women among them? I was there, wasn't I? As many women dwell there as men, and they bear the same zeal and purpose. They're even led by a woman, Skepsis, and there's a great reverence for God's female spirit. We prayed to her by her Greek name, Sophia. Sophia. The name shimmered in my head. Why had I never prayed to her? Yalta grew quiet, so quiet I feared she'd lost the desire to go on. Turning, I saw our shadows against the wall, the bent stick of Yalta's spine, the waves and tangles of my hair spewing like a fountain. I could barely sit still. I wanted her to tell me everything about the women who lived in stone houses on the side of the hill, about the things they studied and wrote. As I gazed at her now, she seemed different to me. She lived among them. Finally, she spoke. I spent 8 years with the Therapeutae and tried to embrace their life. They were caring. They didn't judge me. They saved me. But in the end, I was not suited to their life. And you wrote and studied? My job was to tend the herbs and vegetables. But yes, I spent many hours in the library. Mind you, it's nothing like the great library in Alexandria. It's a donkey shed by comparison, but there are treasures in it. Like what? I was bouncing a little on the bed. She patted my leg. All right, all right. There's a copy of Plato's Symposium there. In it, he wrote that his old mentor, Socrates, was taught philosophy by a woman. Her name was Diotima. Seeing my eyes grow wide, she said, and there's a badly stained copy of Epiphios, written by a female named Aspersia. She was the teacher of Pericles. I've heard of
I'm just
neither of
gonna
them.
break in for a second, just let you know it's 8:27.
Okay. We just have, well, a few pages here
Okay,
to finish this chapter. Is that all right?
okay, it's fine with me.
Okay. I've heard of neither of them, I said, pierced to think of my ignorance and odd that such women existed. Oh, but the real treasure is a copy of a hymn, the exaltation of Ina, Inanna. It came to us from Sumeria. This I've heard, not the hymn, but Inanna, the goddess, queen of heaven, and Yahweh's adversary. Some Jewish women secretly made sacrificial cakes for her. Did you read the exaltation? I asked. Lady of all the divine powers, resplendent light, righteous woman, clothed in radiance, mistress of heaven. You can recite it? Only a small part. It too was written by a woman, a priestess. I know because militia ago, I'm sorry, because 2 millennia ago, she signed her name to it. And Hiduana, we women revered her for her boldness. Why had I never signed my name to what I wrote? I don't know why you would leave such a place as that, I said. If I should be so fortunate as to be banished to this therapeutic, you couldn't pry me from it. It has its goodness, but also its hardships. One's life is not entirely one's own, but is ruled by the community. Obedience is required, and there's a great deal of fasting. Did you run away? How did you come to be here? Now, where would I have run to? I'm here with you because Skepsis did not cease in pleading my case to harm. He's a cruel man and a belligerent ass, but eventually he petitioned the council to let me leave the therapeutic on the condition I also left Alexandria. They sent me here to your father, who is the youngest of us and had no choice but to obey his brother. Does father know of these things? Yes, as does your mother, whose first thought upon rising each morning is that I am a thorn in her right side, and I am the thorn in her left, I said with some pride. We were startled by a noise, a scrape of furniture beyond the door, and it drew up in silence and waited, rewarded at last by Shipra settling back into her voluptuous snores. Listen to me, Yalta said, and I knew she was about to divulge the true reason she dosed Shipra's drink, and came to me in the middle of the night. I wanted to tell her about my vision, how it visited my dream, Anna who shines, and hear her affirm the meaning I'd given to it, but that would have to wait. I've been meddling, Yalta said. I took it as my task to listen at your parents' door. Tomorrow morning, they will come to your room and remove the scrolls and inks from your chest. Whatever it contains will be taken and burned. I said, yes. I wasn't surprised, but I felt the crush of it. I forced myself to look over at the chest of cedar in the corner. Inside were my narratives of the matriarchs, of the women and girls of Alexandria, of Asenath. This, my small collection of lost stories. It also contained my commentaries on the scriptures, trustees of philosophy, psalms, Greek lessons, the inks I'd mixed, my carefully boned pens, my palette and writing board. They would make ash of it all. If we are to thwart this, we must make haste, said Yalta. You must remove the most cherished items from the chest, and I will hide them in my room until we can find a better place for safekeeping. I sprang up, Yalta trailing behind me with the lamp. We knelt over the chest, the slick of light coming to rest above my head, and lifted out armfuls of scrolls. They clattered to the floor, against the floor. Sadly, you cannot remove all of them, Yalta said. It would raise suspicion. Your parents expect to find the chest full. If it's not, they will turn the house over searching. She produced 2 goatskin pouches from the girdle inside her robe. Take only the number of scrolls that will fit inside these skins. Her gaze bore down. I suppose I must leave behind my palette and writing board and most of my inks. She kissed my forehead. Hurry. I selected my corpus of lost stories, leaving the rest behind. I arranged them in the pouches, which still carried the faint stink of an animal pen. Wedging the 13 scrolls into tight honeycombs inside the bags. Into the last one, I managed to slip 2 vials of ink, 2 reed pens, and 3 sheets of clean papyrus. I wrapped the goatskins in a faded purple robe and tied it with a leather thong. I placed the bundle into Yalta's arms. Wait, I said, take my incantation bowl too. I fear they will find it here. Leaving the red thread in place, I quickly redraped the bowl in flax and added it to the bundle. Yalta said, I'll hide it in my room, but it may not be safe there very long either. As I stuffed my writings into the goatskins, an idea had formed in my mind, one designed to gain me freedom from my room. I tried now to put it into words. Tomorrow, when my parents come, I will behave like a repentant daughter. I will confess I've been disobedient and stubborn. I will plead for forgiveness. I will be like one of those professional mourners who pretend grief and wail at the graves of strangers. She studied me a moment. Take care you don't weep too much. A river of tears will make them wary. A trickle will be believed. I opened the door to be sure Sipra was still asleep and watched Yalta creep past her with my precious belongings. My aunt had made her freedom. I would make mine. And that ends that chapter. Are any questions or concerns or thoughts?
Well, first of all, I do like the way that she writes, because it carries, it carries the story along.
Mhm.
Although she gives us a lot of information, it's in the right place at the right time. And so we still have a description of the
Culture
of
at
the
that time.
people. Yeah, of the culture, yes. And but it all fits in well in the story.
Mhm.
So yeah, I do like I like her writing style.
Yeah. And she kind of she leaves little cliffhangers, it seems, that
Yeah.
makes you want to go on.
Any thoughts, Harriet, before we start the round table?
Couple of things crossed my mind as Sakina was reading, but now I don't remember them. The one thing, Anna is a determined soul. And even though she's young, she has the guidance. And it seems as though the one thing that crossed my mind as Sakina was reading, just came to me, is that the things that we practice and believe in Inner Haven is that God, the creator, the source, puts things in the right place at the right time for all of us. And this has been true, and this is showing even in this instance. Yalta was sent to live with with her brother, Anna's father. And the timing, everything, is just right, so that to help move the story along and also keep you in suspense.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Anna I felt, was young for her age, but had an innate wisdom inside her. And so did her aunt. And that.
Yeah.
So.
The other thing that I thought about as I was reading this is, have either one of you remember or seen the movie with Yentl with
Yes,
Barbara Streisand.
yes.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. That's what I thought. I mean, I see her in that role.
Yeah. That came to my mind when the first time I read this book,
Mhm.
is that movie Yentl.
Mhm.
So
Yeah. Well, I thought yeah, it is an interesting story. Yeah,
I,
and and you and you do want to see what's going to happen with the characters.
yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I guess this is for we can start our roundtable real quick. What did we get from the session tonight, and how can we apply it to our lives?
Well, I'd like to share that to me, it's to have that courage to be true to what we feel in our heart we are, and what we're to do no matter what. It's to have
Mhm.
that courage. And there may be some backlash. I know when I was a young age, I had to live with my parents, even though I didn't like the Catholic religion and what I was learning, and that. But boy, as soon as I got married, the last time I was actually in the church was when I got married, and then I didn't go back unless it was somebody's wedding or,
Mhm.
something like that. But there was a lot of backlash. But
Mhm.
to me, um, it goes to show that when we stand true to ourselves and take that courage, the divine is always there, putting into place what needs to be done, giving
Mhm.
us the words to express whatever it is. And that, so to me, it's having that courage to take that first step.
Mhm. Thank you. Thank you. How about you, Harriet?
Well, to me, the story as it unfolds just tells me that we as women have, from the very beginning, had to really fend for ourselves, even though we were being told that we were going to be taken care of by our husbands and fathers and brothers in some instances. But we've always had to fight and struggle for the things that we desire, to be who we are, to be true to ourselves. And in reading her story, it just lets me know, hey, no matter what, we will succeed at whatever we put our minds to, with the help of our Creator.
Mhm. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I think what I got from this tonight is that there's always somebody in your corner,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and in all of our choices and all of our decisions, there's always somebody there. And and even with her, she had several people that were in her corner, some that could help her and some that could not, openly. So it's good to be reminded to look to the people who support us
Mm-hmm.
and to appreciate their support and the things that and the things that they can help to advise us or to counsel us or to show us. So that's one of the things that I got from it tonight.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thank you ladies. I thank you ladies for being that for being there for me. Y'all are my support.
Yeah. We thank you.
Hmm. Okay. Well, we don't have anything for tomorrow, but Saturday we have Joy Trammell that's coming in, and she's going to talk about astral travel. So I'm really excited to hear about that. When we were at the conference, when I met her at the what was the name of the
The
metaphysical and
holistic,
spiritual
holistic,
expo?
yeah, holistic.
Holistic, yes, holistic and spiritual expo. Um, she had created her own deck of tarot cards based on like the local graffiti on the trains. So that was, so, and that was kind of interesting because when you think about it, just the artistry, they go with that. And when you think of a train, you always think of, motion, ever moving, ever, always going forward. So I'm really excited to hear what she has to say about astral travel. So that's Sunday, that's Saturday from 2 to 4. And hopefully everybody got their links, and I guess the phone and the computer will work, will link itself up. Let's see, Sunday, I do have my calendar right here. I think Sunday is Kabbalah. Let me make sure, because I think that will be the 4th Sunday, I believe.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Oh, we have 5 Sundays this month. We have 5 Sundays this month. So on the 23rd, we'll do Kabbalah. And on the 30th, because my cousin had her birthday party on last Saturday. So on the 30th, Andre will be, I think, completing the Book of Enoch. I think we finished the Watchers, and now I think we're the Book of the Watchers, and I think we'll be finishing up that. I think I'm not quite sure, but I think that we might be either close to the conclusion of the Book of Enoch, or or we'll be close to the end of this little section that he's doing. And then that's pretty much it for the rest of this week. And I guess that's pretty much it. Harriet, do you want to? I remembered finally. Do you want to
Yes,
say you're part of the commercial?
yes, just remember to subscribe, like, and comment on our YouTube channel. And that's Inner Haven, a green circle with a white letter I in the middle.
Thank you. And Sakina, can you show, can you put the book up in front so that everybody can take a look at the book? Yes.
Yeah. Can you see it okay?
Yeah,
Yes,
just up a little bit higher. Yeah. And so if anyone is on YouTube and they see what we're doing and you want to read along with us, please do. And let us know what you think about the book, and how you how is it working for you in your life, and how can you apply it to your life? Okay, well then that's pretty much it. Thank you, Sakina. Would anyone like to close us out in prayer? I can. Oh, okay. Go ahead. No,
right.
go ahead.
Oh, all right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Beloved source of all that is, was, and will forever be, we thank you that we can come together and share whatever it is that is upon our hearts, that we can encourage each other to be true to who and what we are. Channels, beings of light and love, here to manifest your living presence. We thank you that we are able to go about our work each day knowing that just by being true to ourselves, we are sending out the message of divine love. And this is so. We let it be. Amen.
Amen. Okay, thank you, everybody. Love you.
Have a good week, and I'll see you Saturday.
See you Saturday.
Bless you.
Bless you. Love
Night
you.
all.
Bye.